The Standard Deviants present the stimulating world of psychology.
Okay, now, Fritz, I'm going to hook you up to my new brain monitor.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to...
Now, you've mastered the theories and concepts of psychology, and now you'll be able to share your knowledge with students everywhere by letting them see into your brain. Yes, they'll be able to see your thoughts. Won't that be fun? Okay, now I'm just going to hook up these last two connections to your head. Whoa! Oh, yes. Okay.
Dr. Zapper?
Yeah?
That's your head?
What?
That's your head.
Hello?
My head, your head.
My head! Oh, my head! Yes, my head, not yours. I said I was going to hook it up to your head, not mine. Gotcha. Okay, machine is on.
Dr. Zapper?
Yes?
So, thing gonna hurt?
Yes! I mean, well, let's put it this way. You'll find it very stimulating, psychologically speaking.
Okay, you know what?
Leave the hat on. Let's see. I think it's the red button. I'm not sure. I think it's the red button, though. Let's see if I flip it. Yes! It was the red button. It was the red button. Oh, no. Let's go. Okay, sorry. My mistake. Let's see. Okay, it's on properly now. Well, that was fun.
Hi, I'm Galila Azaris, and welcome to the stimulating world of psychology. Get psyched, because over the next 2 hours, we'll stimulate your brain with hot ideas and cool concepts that'll help you cruise right through your psychology class with ease. You'll learn about the nature-nurture debate, research methods of psychologists, theories of behavior, what motivates us, how we learn and remember, how we interact with each other, and much, much more.
Okay, here we go. It's disclaimer time. In order to fully grasp the intricacies of psychology, you have to go to class, read your book, and listen to your professor. So, do all that.
Part 1, Introduction. Get psyched.
Psychology is all about getting inside people's heads to try and understand why they do what they do.
Oh, Mr. Freud, why do you do what you do? Mr. Freud...
Oh, go away, you little rat.
In beginning psychology, what you have to do is get inside the heads of the psychology all-stars, those geniuses who have developed the reasons why people do what they do, like Jean Piaget, B.F. Skinner, Ivan Pavlov, Sigmund Freud, of course, and a bunch of others we'll tell you about later.
Psychologists define their science as the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. Behavior is what you can see a person do, or the observable actions of an individual.
Mental processes are stuff like memories, thoughts, dreams, emotional feelings, and other conscious or unconscious experiences.
It was really pleasant visiting Grandma. Someday, I'll be a part-time bag boy. I think my left foot is bigger than my right foot. You must do evil things.
Psychology is a science that attempts to predict human behavior and mental processes. We psychologists want to describe, understand, predict, and control or modify behaviors and thoughts. We observe behavior, then we try to predict future behaviors based on what we have seen.
Section A, Psychological Schools of Thought and the Nature-Nurture Debate.
Once you see that psychology is just analyzing and predicting behavior, then you can get to the work, which is looking at all the different angles that affect and determine behavior. Just like with any subject, you have to learn the vocabulary. Once you learn the terms and get to know about the people who coined them, you've learned a lot about the subject.
There are many different behaviors, and there are different angles we can use to approach these different behaviors. As a psychology student, you need to know the names of the different behaviors you probably already recognize in other people. But you need more practice. See?
In fact, you've probably heard these terms before, so they're already in your mind, all sort of jumbled together and fuzzy. But don't worry, we're going to clear it all up for you.
Are people born to act and think the way they do, or is behavior determined by the environment? This question is the crux of the nature-nurture debate.
Does a child misbehave because he inherited the tendency to be very active? Or does he misbehave because of the way his parents raise him?
Good question. Let's go to our panel of experts.
Well, Ricardo, of course it depends on who you ask. Psychologists who believe the child inherited the tendency to be active is coming down on the side of nature. In other words, they believe biology and genes and that sort of thing determine the child's behavior.
Other psychologists would have you believe that the kid gets lots of attention from his parents when he misbehaves. So since the kid likes the attention, it's likely he will misbehave. This is the nurture viewpoint, the belief that the kid's environment determines his behavior.
Now, isn't it true that most psychologists believe that both nature and nurture play significant roles in shaping human behavior?
Yes, that's true.
And isn't it also true that the critical question is how much nature or nurture determines behavior?
Yes, that's right.
All the major schools of psychological thought share the same goals, but each has its own way of looking at things and reaching goals. All the schools of thought try to describe, understand, predict, and control or modify behavior.
Dad, that is, like, totally unfair. Like, it's my business if I want to, like, dye my hair green and, like, pierce my nose. Like, you're always trying to, like, control me or, like, modify me in some junk. Ugh.
If you gathered a group of psychologists who all followed different theories in one room and asked them to analyze the same problem, you'd get a bunch of different answers. Here's how followers of the biological, psychoanalytic, behavioral, cognitive, and humanistic theories might approach the same problem.
Little Billy McCready is having a great time playing with his toys. His mom wants him to clean up and come into the kitchen for dinner, but Billy wants no part of that. So cute little Billy throws a big, bad temper tantrum.
No, I don't want to eat now.
Dear, why does Billy have such temper tantrums?
Mrs. McCready is frustrated and doesn't know what to do with him. Here's an overview of how followers of the major psychological schools of thought would react to Billy's tantrum. This is just an introduction. We'll go into a lot more detail on each of these theorists and theories later in the video. Mrs. McCready figures Billy must have inherited his father's bad temper. Followers of the biological theory would agree with her.
There's not much you can do about it. See, behavior is inherited.
The biological theorists believe that behavior is inherited, so there's not much you can do to control it. But Sigmund Freud, founder of the psychoanalytic theory, would disagree with the biological theorists.
That's ridiculous. Have you not read my psychoanalytical series?
Freud might argue that the boy is struggling with his mother for control of when and where he goes to the bathroom, since Freud believed that kids Billy's age get most of their pleasure from emptying their bladder and bowels. On the other hand, B.F. Skinner, a behaviorist psychologist, would likely tell Mrs. McCready that little Billy's behavior has nothing to do with his bladder and bowels.
Oh, Sigmund, that's a lot of bull.
In fact, Skinner would probably make Billy's mom pretty angry, because the behaviorists believe that kids perform the behaviors that their parents reinforce them for. Skinner might ask Billy's mom what she does to encourage Billy to have temper tantrums. But Mrs. McCready's ruffled feathers would be soothed by Jean Piaget and the cognitive theorists.
No, Mrs. McCready.
Who would tell her that Billy is in the pre-operational stage, so he just can't see things from her point of view. They might suggest that Billy needs to accommodate and assimilate new information so he can understand why he should eat his dinner when she asks him to. Finally, the humanistic psychologists, like Carl Rogers, would assure Mrs. McCready that Billy is just a good kid.
There's nothing wrong with this young man.
Who's trying to find out who he is so he can maximize his potential. So as you can see, there are big differences in how followers of different schools of thought approach the same problem. There's more detail on the way describing each school of thought.
Let's go over what you've got so far. Some psychologists believe that behavior is controlled by genetics and biological functions. In other words, they think behavior is controlled by nature. Others believe that people learn how to act from their environment, or that behavior is controlled by nurture. But in the nature-nurture debate, the most popular opinion is that behavior is controlled by both nature and nurture. The real debate is how much nature controls and how much nurture controls. Regardless of where they stand on the nature-nurture debate, the followers of all the major psychological schools of thought have the same goals: to describe, understand, predict, and control or modify behavior.
Section B, psychological experiments.
Experiments are a very important part of psychology. You may be anxious to dive right into wild and wacky behaviors, but psychology is built on experiments. And if you need help learning them, come and see me. I'll show you all about experiments. I even have an extra electronic beanie. Fritz here. Fritz loves to be part of psychological experiments.
Psychologists use the scientific method to study psychological phenomena. The scientific method is a process of developing theories or explanations of behavior.
The scientific method is a four-step process that goes like this. First, you develop a theory. Then you form a hypothesis, which is a testable prediction. Then you conduct a study that suggests a cause and effect relationship. After the study, you take your results and adjust your original prediction. Then you design another study to test your refined hypothesis. You'll find these steps on your insert card.
My theory is that my mom is lame, and my hypothesis is that she won't let me see my favorite band in concert. Now I'll conduct my study. Mom, can I go see the Sound Butchers in concert tonight?
Of course, dear. And I have to compliment you on that great boyfriend of yours. I mean, with his not wanting to get a job and everything, what a free thinker.
Given those results, I'll have to refine my prediction. Mom might be pretty cool. I'll test her again later to see if my refined hypothesis holds up.
Psychologists use specific research methods to gather their information. The methods are tests, interviews, and observations.
These are research methods. First, there are tests. Tests look at how a subject responds to a particular event or problem. They must be reliable. In other words, they have to produce results that are consistent and predictable. And they must be valid, meaning that they measure what they are designed to measure.
Next are interviews, which gather information by studying how subjects describe themselves as they talk with the interviewer.
And observations are descriptions that the investigator makes of the subject. You can make observations in either a laboratory setting or a natural setting like someone's home or workplace. Case studies are more in-depth observations that the investigators use to gather lots of information and draw conclusions that they hope to apply to other people as well as to the ones they're studying. Case studies may go beyond observations to include tests and interviews.
Okay, there are 3 basic research designs or ways to set up an experiment. They are experimental studies, correlational studies, and descriptive studies. Your psychology professor is likely to test you on research design, so you better pay extra close attention to this section. By the way, this is the last free advice I'm giving you. Next time, it's going to cost you.
Experimental studies give the most solid conclusions when you're testing hypotheses and cause-effect relationships. The investigator manipulates one or more factors in order to see what effect they'll have on behavior or mental processes. The experimental factors that the investigator manipulates to see what will happen are called the independent variables. The effects the investigator gets from the experiment are called the dependent variables. Why dependent? Because the results depend on the independent variables.
All research studies should be replicable. In other words, other researchers should be able to repeat the experiment so the results can be further proved or disproved. Psychologists say that in order for a test to be useful in predicting behavior, you should be able to repeat the same experiment and get the same results 95 out of 100 times, or a probability of less than 0.05. Phew!
In order for a study to be repeated exactly the way it was done the first time, the researchers who design the study have to carefully describe the independent variables, or the factors they manipulated in the experiment, and they have to describe the dependent variables, or the effect they got from the experiment. They also have to write down a list of exact procedures they followed to do the experiment. All these descriptions are called the operational definitions.
It's time for another fun-filled edition of Psycho Jackpot, where your knowledge of psychology can mean big bucks.
Welcome to Psycho Jackpot. I'm your host, Art Plinko, and I'd like to introduce you to our contestants. First, we have the lovely Joan Flater from Rockville, Maryland. Hey, Joan.
Hi, Art.
Yeah, right. Good to see you. And, of course, we have Bob Taskey from Bloomington, Indiana.
Hi, Art.
Yeah. All right, contestants, here we go. Our first topic tonight is research designs. Okay, now you know the rules. Okay, I'm going to read you a question and give you 3 possible answers to the questions. Now, Joni and Bob, you got to hit your buzzers when you think you know which answer is correct. Here's the first question. What are independent variables? Your answer choices are A, the experimental factors that an investigator manipulates. B, the effects an investigator gets from an experiment. Joan, what's your answer?
It's A, Art. Independent variables are the experimental factors that an investigator manipulates.
That's right, Joni, baby. Congratulations. Now, for answering correctly, you win twice your weight in salt and a complete collection of Reader Digest from 1953 to 1962. Yeah.
When researchers do an experiment and observe the results, they want to be certain they know exactly which factors in the experiment caused the results. So here's what they do. They randomly assign their research subjects to groups, the experimental group and the control group.
The experimental groups and the control group are exposed to the exact same conditions, except the experimental groups are exposed to manipulation of the independent variable. In other words, everything is the same for the experimental groups and the control group, except for the things that the researcher is tinkering with. This is very important because the researcher wants to know precisely what is causing the results. If only a couple things are different, it helps narrow the possibilities of what is causing the effects in the experimental groups.
And 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4, 5 potato, 6 potato, 7 potato, or you have to go on that side of the room. And 1
Like we
potato.
said, researchers assign subjects to each group randomly. In other words, there's no reason why someone's chosen for one group or the other. This helps make sure that the different results between the two groups is not due to differences in the subjects.
Well, the best thing you can do is just to start getting out your raw feelings about things that are troubling you.
Yes, well, the hardest thing about all this is how we're always being exposed to the manipulation of the independent variable. Aren't we supposed to be assigned to groups randomly? Why am I always in the experimental group? I mean, just once I'd like to experience what it's like to be in the control group.
Yeah. You go, girl, and take me with you.
The second type of research design is the correlational study. Investigators use correlational studies to look at the relationships between the variables, or the things they want to study.
For example, a researcher might want to know if there's a relationship between the number of exams given at a university in 1 week and the number of pizzas that the local pizza place sells during the same week. The researcher can't control how many exams are given or how many pizzas are sold, but she can see if there's a relationship between the two, and if so, what kind of relationship it is. So, in a correlational study, the researcher doesn't have control over the variables, but just studies the relation between them.
A positive correlation is when the variables do the same thing at the same time. That is, as one increases or decreases, so does the other. So if pizza sales skyrocket during exam week at the end of each semester, we can say there's a positive correlation between exams and pizza consumption. A positive correlation suggests a direct relationship between the variables. They do the same thing at the same time.
So, like, what's a negative correlation?
A negative correlation is when the two variables do the opposite thing from each other. If pizza sales dropped significantly during every exam week, there would be a negative correlation between exams and pizza consumption. A negative correlation suggests an indirect relationship between the variables. One variable does the opposite of what the other is doing.
But there's one really important thing to keep in mind with correlations. You can't say for sure that the change in one variable, or one thing you're studying, causes the change in the other variable. With our pizza example, if you found that pizza sales consistently doubled during every exam week at your school, you still couldn't say for sure that students are ordering more pizza because they have more exams to study for. Professors may give more exams when it's cold, so maybe the students are just staying in and ordering pizzas because they don't want to go out in the cold. Or maybe it's just because they like sausage. Fact is, you just don't know. All you know for sure is that there seems to be some relationship between how many exams students are taking and how much pizza they're ordering. Hey, pizza man. Thanks. You want a bite?
The third research method, descriptive studies, are the case studies and observations that we talked about earlier.
Researchers find a systematic way to observe what they want to study, and they write down what they see. It is very simple, really. They may use their descriptions to form a hypothesis, which is an idea they want to test, and then they can design an experiment to test the hypothesis.
So, psychologists do experiments using the scientific method. First, they develop a theory. Next, they form a hypothesis. Then they conduct a study, and finally, they adjust the hypothesis according to the results of the study and design another study to test the refined hypothesis. There are 3 ways, or research designs, that psychologists use to set up an experiment. They are experimental studies, in which researchers manipulate factors called independent variables to see what happens. Correlational studies, which look at relationships between variables. And finally, descriptive studies, where researchers write down descriptions of what they observe and often use these descriptions to help them form a hypothesis and set up a study.
Don't be a neuron. Remember to rewind if you need to.
Cut! That's moron, not neuron, you idiot.
Section C, neurons and the nervous system.
Your nervous system carries chemical and electrical signals from your body to your brain and from your brain to your body. Before we can understand our actions, memories, and feelings, we need to understand how information from the environment gets into our bodies and how our bodies process it. There are 2 components of the nervous system, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system.
The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, on the other hand, contains the neurons that connect the central nervous system, or CNS, to the rest of the body.
Information comes into our senses like our eyes and ears through what's called sense receptors. The sense receptors change environmental energy into electronic energy. Then they send it down a highway of sensory neurons to the brain. The senses talk to the brain through these sensory neurons.
Next, we'll talk about motor neurons.
Cut! That's neuron, not moron, you idiot.
The motor neurons carry messages in the opposite direction, from the central nervous system to the muscles and glands. The brain talks to the muscles and glands through the motor neurons.
Interneurons carry messages between neurons. They're like the telephone lines that carry the chemical and electrical signals that are being passed along from one neuron to another.
So, any halfwit can see that neurons are the basic building blocks of the nervous system. But what are neurons made of?
Neurons are made up of a bunch of little parts that work together to send electrical and chemical messages on their way from one part of the body to another. First, the dendrites receive the neural messages coming in from other neurons. The message is then sent to the cell body and on through the axon, an extension of the neuron which carries the message through its branching fibers to the dendrites of the next neuron. A myelin sheath, which is a layer of fatty cells, insulates the axon, helping to speed the travel of impulses.
To travel from one neuron to the next, the signal has to cross a synapse, the space between the axon of the sending neuron and the dendrites of the receiving neuron. The signal rides across the space called the synaptic gap, on chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. The chemicals acetylcholine and dopamine are examples of neurotransmitters which carry the message across the synaptic gap. Then they attach themselves to the receiving neuron. The neurotransmitter and the neuron must fit together like puzzle pieces.
Neurons will fire an impulse when they are stimulated by some kind of electrical energy, like a stimulation from the environment or an impulse coming in from another neuron. The impulse is a quick electrical charge called the action potential. Neurons never fire half a shot, so to speak.
So the nervous system is a way your body's parts communicate with each other. The peripheral nervous system, or PNS, sends signals from the body to the central nervous system, or CNS. Sensory neurons carry electrical impulses through the peripheral nervous system to the brain, and motor neurons carry messages from the brain to the muscles and glands. Interneurons, they carry messages between neurons. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine are chemicals that carry the message across the synaptic gap between one neuron and the next. And as soon as they receive that message in the form of an electrical impulse called the action potential, neurons fire. Neurons, like guns, either fire or they don't. This is called all or none firing.
Section D. Sensation.
Sensation is the way your sense receptors and nervous system take in information and turn it into the chemicals and electrical impulses that zoom with the information through your body and your brain.
The absolute threshold of a stimulus is the smallest amount of a stimulus that you can detect. In other words, if you can just barely see a light so that if it was any dimmer you couldn't see it at all, you'd be at the absolute threshold of the stimulus, which is light.
The difference threshold is the smallest difference a person can detect between two stimuli. So, if you can just barely tell the difference between two musical notes, then you may be at the difference threshold for those notes. The difference threshold is also called the just noticeable difference, or JND.
Welcome back to Psycho Jackpot, where your knowledge of psychology could mean big bucks.
Our next psychology topic is the just noticeable difference, or JND. Okay? Now, which pair of stimuli have a just noticeable difference? Right? Here are the possible answers, Joan. A, an opera singer and the sound of nails on a chalkboard. Ooh. B, an antelope and a rhinoceros. Or C, the colors white and ivory.
Yeah, Bob. A, the sound of like an opera singer and nails on the chalkboard.
No, you're dead wrong. What are you, nuts? I can see why you chose that answer, but the correct answer is the colors white and ivory because you can just barely notice the difference between the two colors. Better luck next time, Bobby boy.
Information that comes in through the senses zaps through the neurons to the brain, which interprets the information. Here's how information comes in through your eyes and your ears.
You ever wonder how your eyes work? Let's take a look.
Light enters your eye through the pupil. The iris determines how much light gets in. The lens focuses images onto the retina by changing its shape. This process is called accommodation. The retina has receptors called rods and cones. Rods detect black, white, and gray. Cones detect fine detail, and they can pick up color when there is ample light.
The optic nerve carries neural impulses to the brain. Where the optic nerve leaves the eye, you have a blind spot, because there are no receptor cells there to pick up images. But you don't notice the blind spot because your brain puts together the images you do see and it fills in the blank for you.
Your eye also has feature detectors, which are nerve cells that pick up specific features like movement, shape, and depth.
You take in a lot of information through your sense of hearing, so you have to learn about how I work too. So get ready because here it comes.
Your outer ear funnels sound waves to your eardrum, which vibrates from the sound waves. The middle ear, which includes the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, amplifies and transmits the vibrations to the inner ear or cochlea, which is filled with fluid.
The pressure change in the fluid that results from all this vibrating causes your basilar membrane to ripple and hair cells to bend. The hair movement triggers neurons, which send impulses to your brain. Your brain interprets these nerve impulses, and you're rockin', man.
Section E, motivation.
There are 4 theories that describe what motivates us. They are the instinct theory, the drive reduction theory, the arousal theory, and the incentive theory.
The instinct theory says we are motivated by fixed behavior patterns that we don't have to learn. For example, we eat when we're hungry. This theory of motivation applies better to animals than to humans. What motivates us humans is a bit more complex than simple instincts.
The drive reduction theory is an updated version of the instinct theory that applies better to humans. It suggests that the discomfort associated with physiological needs, like the need to eat, drink, and go to the bathroom, creates an aroused psychological state that drives the person to reduce the need. So we reduce the need for food by eating. That's why it's called the drive reduction theory. It says that our desire to reduce the drive is what motivates us. People will explore and learn just for the kick they get from it. Mountain climbers love the excitement and stimulation they get from conquering the mountain. We're driven to these behaviors because we like them. They feel good. But they don't serve any obvious physiological need like eating and drinking. Each individual has an optimum level of this type of stimulation that he or she enjoys. If the stimulation gets to be too much, it causes tension, and people will look for ways to reduce the stimulation and get rid of the tension.
Really, I'm guided by the arousal theory, which states that humans will look for ways to increase arousal because they like it.
The incentive theory takes into account the factors that lure us into an aroused state. For instance, when you smell food cooking, you may decide you want some, even though you didn't feel hungry until you smelled the food.
Clothing companies count on us to buy clothes that lure people into an aroused state. Sexy dresses and tight jeans are designed to put the people who look at the wearer in an aroused state.
Abraham Maslow, a humanistic psychologist we'll talk more about later, developed a hierarchy of needs which ranks human needs by how important they are for survival. Like the arousal theory and the incentive theory, Maslow's hierarchy of needs tries to explain what motivates humans. Even though modern psychologists generally think that Maslow's hierarchy is pretty arbitrary and it doesn't always hold up, it shows how some needs take priority over others.
At the base of Maslow's hierarchy are the physiological needs, which are hunger, thirst, and sleep. Maslow thought it would be very hard to pay attention to any other needs until you took care of your physiological needs. Then come safety needs, like a sense of security, stability, and order. Then, once you're fed, rested, and you're in a secure environment, you can attend to belongingness and love needs, like friends, family, and a mate. Next come esteem needs, like achievement and recognition. And finally, self-actualization needs, which is the need to live up to your fullest potential and really kick butt in life. According to Maslow, as you take care of the lower level needs, the higher level needs start to bug you until you satisfy them too.
So there's lots of theories about what motivates us. My dog Haas here is motivated by the instinct theory. He has fixed patterns of behavior. When nature calls, he listens. Then there's the drive reduction theory. It says that we eat and drink and stuff to reduce the discomfort caused by unsatisfied drives. I go for the arousal theory myself. I like to increase the arousal if it feels good. But when I see a chili dog, oh, I'll want it. But that's the incentive theory talking. It's time for me to reduce this drive now. Copy that.
Section F. Emotion.
Emotions are a combination of physiological arousal, expressive behavior, and conscious as well as unconscious experience. In other words, they are a combination of the stimulation you get from what comes in through your senses, how you react to the stimulation, and what you're thinking and feeling at the time.
Here are some of the theories about what makes you feel emotions. The James Lange theory, developed in the 1890s, says you experience emotion after your body responds to some stimulus, and your body's physical response is what causes the emotion. For example, something happens that makes your heart pound, so you feel afraid.
Now, according to the James Lange theory, my heart is pounding because there's a monster after me. My body's response should make me scream and run. Yep, it worked. I'm afraid.
The Cannon-Bard theory proposes that physiological arousal, which is your body's response to a stimulus, occurs at the same time as the feeling of emotion. As your heart starts pounding, you begin feeling scared, and according to this theory, the physical response does not cause the emotional feeling. In other words, it's not just the fact that your heart is pounding that causes you to feel scared.
Now, according to the Cannon-Bard theory, my body is tensing up, I'm starting to feel scared, and my heart is starting to pound all at the same time. So physical response doesn't cause the emotional feeling, according to this view.
But most modern psychologists believe that our memory, our thoughts, the way we interpret situations, all play a factor on how we experience our emotions. So that brings in Schachter's two-factor theory,
which is also known as cognitive labeling. According to this theory, to experience emotion, you have to have a physical response. That's one factor. And you have to be able to recognize and label that response. That's the other factor.
Emotions come from a combination of physiological arousal, expressive behavior, conscious and unconscious experience. There are several theories about how emotions occur. The James Lange theory, which says that you feel emotion after your body responds to a stimulus. The Cannon-Bard theory, which says that emotion occurs at the same time as the body's response to a stimulus. And Schachter's two-factor theory, which says that you have to have a physical response and then you have to be able to recognize and label the response.
Part 2. Learning and Cognition.
Behaviorist psychologists believe people respond to the consequences of their behavior. In other words, if it feels good, you're probably going to do it again.
Behaviorist psychologists don't think it's important to study people's inner needs, thoughts, feelings, and motives. They go straight for the behavior, looking at how people respond to the things in their environment that affect them. People learn to associate events. Like when you see lightning, you listen for thunder, because you know it's coming. Associating events like lightning and thunder is called associative learning, or stimulus response learning. You make associations and figure out that some events occur together.
There are two types of associative or stimulus response learning: classical conditioning and operant conditioning. These two types of learning are kind of similar, but they're actually pretty different.
Here's the difference in a nutshell. In classical conditioning, you have some stimulus from the environment trigger a response in the subject, rat, human, whatever. In operant conditioning, the subject does some behavior, and then the environment responds.
Section A, Classical Conditioning.
While studying how dogs digest food, Ivan Pavlov noticed that his dog started drooling in anticipation of the food. When the dogs saw their food bowls, heard the noises that they always heard before they were fed, and even saw the person who usually fed them, they would salivate as if there was food right there in front of them. The events that normally preceded the food elicited the drooling response.
The idea behind classical conditioning is that a stimulus from the environment elicits or stimulates a reflexive response.
Pavlov realized that his dogs were exhibiting an important form of learning, associative learning. The dogs associated the appearance of the dog bowls, the person who fed them, and the noises of getting the food ready with being fed. Although Pavlov started out studying digestion in dogs, once he noticed this important type of learning going on, he decided to study learning.
So, Pavlov sounded a tone just before he put meat into the dogs' mouths. At first, the tone by itself didn't get the dogs to salivate, but after a few times of pairing the tone with the meat, The dogs started to salivate when they heard the tone because they anticipated that the tone would be followed by meat. This is a classic case of associative or stimulus-response learning. The dogs learned to associate the tone with the meat, so either the tone or the meat could make them drool.
Now you know the experiment. Here come the terms.
The meat that the dogs wanted to eat is the unconditioned stimulus, or UCS. If you've ever had a begging dog drool on your leg during dinner, you know that dogs naturally salivate when they anticipate eating. No one has to teach them to do it. Dogs naturally drool at the sight of food. That's why the meat is an unconditioned stimulus. It naturally and automatically elicits a response.
The unconditioned stimulus naturally and automatically elicits a response. If I try to light your finger with my lighter, you will pull your finger away naturally and automatically. The fire is an unconditioned stimulus. Remember that a stimulus is the thing that brings about a response.
The dog's unconditioned response to the meat was salivation. No one had to teach the dogs how to salivate when they smelled and tasted the meat. It just came naturally, so the response is unconditioned.
So, when I try to light your finger on fire and you naturally and automatically pull your finger away, your response, pulling your finger away, is an unconditioned response. I didn't have to teach you to pull your finger away. You just did it naturally. So it's unconditioned, an unconditioned response.
A neutral stimulus is one that, unlike the unconditioned stimulus, does not naturally produce a response. In Pavlov's experiments, the neutral stimulus was the tone. Until the dogs learned to associate the tone with the meat, it did not produce any response in them at all.
Did you hear that? A neutral stimulus does not naturally and automatically produce a response.
Once the dogs paired the sound of the tone with the meat and started to salivate just at the sound of the tone was no longer a neutral stimulus. The dogs were taught or conditioned to salivate at the sound of the tone. So the tone is now the conditioned stimulus, or the CS.
So let me get this straight. A neutral stimulus doesn't produce any response at all. But once the neutral stimulus is associated with an unconditioned stimulus, one that naturally produces a response, the neutral stimulus isn't neutral anymore because it now elicits a response as well.
Right. And as you might expect, the conditioned response, or CR, is the dogs drooling in response to the tone. Until they were taught to, they would not naturally salivate just at the sound of a tone. After they were conditioned, they would drool just to the sound of a tone. This is the conditioned response.
A conditioned response is not a natural response. You have to learn it.
Remember, unconditioned means unlearned. Something that just happens naturally, automatically. Unlike this stag-burned food, don't know how to use a turn signal. And conditioned means learn. Something you made happen. Something that doesn't happen just by itself. Commercial products have paired themselves with lifestyles for a long time. They want you to associate their product with something you want to get.
Remember, in classical conditioning, first there's a stimulus from the environment, then you get the response from the subject. In the case of my dogskis, the meat was the stimulus from the environment, and the dogskis responded by salivating. Didn't you? You salivated all over the place.
Back at the beginning of the 20th century, John Watson experimented on a kid named Little Albert to find out more about conditioning humans. Watson's experiments would probably not be repeated today because they're considered pretty unethical. But we can learn a lot from poor Little Albert. We're going to throw some more terms at you after we describe this experiment, so stay on your toes.
Little Albert, like all young kids, was naturally afraid of loud noises, but he was not afraid of white rats. Watson put Little Albert into a room with a white rat, and just as Little Albert was reaching out to touch the rat, Watson smashed a hammer against a steel bar right behind his head. After only a few pairings of the sound and the rat, Little Albert burst into tears as soon as he saw the rat. And a few days later, poor Little Albert burst into tears when he spotted a white teddy bear, a white rabbit, and a white fur coat.
Let's apply the terms to this experiment. The unconditioned stimulus, or UCS, is the loud noise. The unconditioned response, or UCR, is little Albert's fear of the loud noise, because he's naturally afraid of it. These factors are unconditioned because there is no learning involved with them. Little Albert is naturally afraid of loud noises. He's not naturally afraid of rats, so the rat is the conditioned stimulus, or CS. His fear of the rat is the conditioned response, or CR.
The first phase of classical conditioning learning is called acquisition. Acquisition is the time period in which the unconditioned stimulus, the one you respond to naturally and automatically, becomes associated with the conditioned stimulus, the one you have to learn to respond to. The subject acquires the association.
In the case of little Albert, acquisition occurred when Albert learned to associate the loud noise with the appearance of the rat.
Once the response has been conditioned, in other words, once Albert learned to be afraid of the rat because he associated it with the loud noise, generalization may occur. Generalization is the tendency for things that are similar to the conditioned stimulus to cause a response that's similar to the conditioned response.
So, when little Albert freaked out at the sight of a fur coat, he was demonstrating generalization. Albert was not conditioned to fear fur coats, but fur coats reminded him enough of the rats that he generalized his fear to the coats as well.
Discrimination is the ability to tell the difference between similar stimuli. It's like the opposite of generalization. If little Albert could discriminate between the fur coat and the rat, he wouldn't be afraid of the fur coat.
If Watson had someone wearing a fur coat come and play with little Albert, and he didn't whack the iron bar to make lots of noise while they were playing, Albert would eventually learn discrimination. He would be able to discriminate, or tell the difference, between the fur coat and the rat, and he'd know that the fur coat was not associated with the scary noise like the rat was.
Extinction is the process of getting rid of a conditioned response. You can make a conditioned response go away if you present the conditioned stimulus, like the rat, a whole bunch of times without following it with the unconditioned stimulus, like the big scary noise. Let's go back to little Albert.
If Watson had shown little Albert the rat a whole bunch of times without banging the iron rod to make a big noise, Albert would have eventually caught on that nothing scary would happen when he saw the rat, and he would stop being afraid of the rat. His association of the rat with the big scary noise would eventually become extinct.
Actually, the term extinction is a little misleading because the association of the unconditioned stimulus, the big noise, with the conditioned stimulus, the rat, only becomes suppressed. It doesn't really go away completely. Little Albert may all of a sudden start freaking out again at the sight of the rat, even though the rat hasn't been associated with the noise for quite a while. This is called spontaneous recovery.
So little Albert's getting brave, and he'll pet the rat because he's pretty sure nothing scary will happen when he does. But then one day, out of the blue, Albert just starts sobbing and crying for his mommy when he sees the rat. Albert is experiencing spontaneous recovery.
Let's review. The unconditioned stimulus naturally and automatically elicits a response. And an unconditioned response is a response that a subject gives naturally, without having to learn anything. A neutral stimulus doesn't naturally produce any response at all. Once a neutral stimulus is associated with an unconditioned stimulus and starts to produce a response, it becomes a conditioned stimulus. The subject has been conditioned to respond to it. A conditioned response is a response that has been learned, like the dogs learning to salivate to the sound of a tone. It's not something they would do naturally.
Section B, operant conditioning.
Operant conditioning differs from classical conditioning in that operant conditioning teaches subjects to associate behaviors with their consequences. That means the subject acts first, and the environment responds with consequences to the action. In classical conditioning, on the other hand, the environment acts first by triggering or eliciting a response from the subject.
According to the principles of operant conditioning, behaviors are more likely to be repeated if they are followed by reinforcement, or something that would provide an incentive to do it again, and less likely to be repeated if they are followed by punishment.
The principles of acquisition, extinction, spontaneous recovery, generalization, and discrimination all apply to operant conditioning too. So, if you didn't catch their meaning when we went over classical conditioning, go back and check it out again.
Be kind to your mind. Rewind.
B.F. Skinner is the big kahuna of operant conditioning. Skinner expanded on the work of a guy named Thorndike, whose law of effect says that people are more likely to do things when the consequences feel good.
Skinner designed the Skinner box, which is a chamber containing a bar that an animal can press to get a food pellet, and a device to record how fast and how often the animal presses the bar.
Skinner used his Skinner box to experiment with teaching animals, like rats and pigeons, to do weird behaviors in order to get food, a reward. The animal would typically have to press a bar, which is a weird behavior for a rat or a bird, and it would get a food pellet.
Have you figured out what the humans want us to do with the bar yet?
Nope, it's still a mystery to me.
To get the animals to perform like he wanted them to, for instance, to get the rats to press the bar in the Skinner box, Skinner used shaping, which is rewarding behaviors that come close to the behavior he was looking for. Behaviors that come close to and lead up to the desired behavior are called successive approximations.
For example, if you want to shape bar-pressing behavior in rats, you start by rewarding a natural behavior. Like when the rat goes near the bar, you give it a food pellet. Once the rat has learned that going near the bar will get it a reward, the food pellet, then you only reward it when it actually touches the bar. After the rat learns that touching the bar gets it a reward, then you start only rewarding it when it presses the bar. Next thing you know, the desired behavior has been shaped through successive approximations.
Operant conditioning is different from classical conditioning because in operant conditioning, the subject acts first. Then you get a response from the environment. If the subject likes the response, then he will probably repeat the behavior.
So far, we've been referring to the things or events that make a subject want to repeat a behavior as rewards. Actually, the more precise term is reinforcer. Some reinforcers are like rewards, but some are not. We'll explain.
Primary reinforcers are like rewards. They can be food, or an hour extra sleep in the morning, or something that feels good and is satisfying all by itself. Secondary reinforcers, on the other hand, are not satisfying all by themselves. Subjects have to learn that secondary reinforcers are worth repeating a behavior.
Things like money and concert tickets are secondary reinforcers. The money and the tickets themselves are not a lot of fun, but you can buy fun stuff with the money, and you can see a show if you have the tickets.
All the reinforcement we've talked about so far is called positive reinforcement. This kind of reinforcement gives the subject something like food, concert tickets, or whatever, to make it more likely that a behavior will be repeated. There's also negative reinforcement, which is not what we typically think of as a reward at all, but it does make the subject want to repeat the behavior. Negative reinforcement reinforces behavior by taking away something unpleasant.
For example, a rat in a Skinner box may learn that pressing the bar stops the electrical current that's going through the floor of the box. This is negative reinforcement because the bar pressing behavior is reinforced when the pain of the electrical current stops.
Despite all my thoughts, I am still just a rat in a box.
Negative reinforcement is often confused with punishment, but it's really not at all like punishment. Punishment is something that discourages the subject from repeating a behavior. Any kind of reinforcement encourages the subject to repeat a behavior.
Don't think of the terms negative as bad and positive as good in the case of reinforcement. Remember that positive reinforcement means giving something good to increase the likelihood of behavior, and negative reinforcement means taking away something that's bad to increase the likelihood of behavior.
So, like we said, the effect of punishment is the opposite of reinforcement. It's an unpleasant event that decreases a behavior or response. But overall, it doesn't work very well. Punished behavior is suppressed, but it isn't forgotten. For example, if a kid gets spanked for picking his nose, he may just make sure he doesn't do it again around his parents. Instead, he may do it in a safe atmosphere where no authority figures can catch him. Also, punishment sometimes backfires by increasing unwanted responses like fear and aggression. Most importantly, it doesn't encourage desired behavior.
There are two types of associative or stimulus response learning: classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Now, don't get confused about the difference between the two. In classical conditioning, the environment provides a stimulus and the subject responds. Like when Pavlov's dogs heard the tone first, then they started to salivate. In operant conditioning, the subject acts first, then the environment responds. And if the subject likes the response, it will probably repeat the behavior. Now, in the case of Skinner's rats, the rat presses the bar first, then it gets a food pellet. Since the rat likes the food pellet, it'll press the bar again.
Section C, Social Learning.
People learn by making associations, but they can also learn through observation, by watching and imitating other people. You don't have to personally experience something to learn about it. Lots of the things you know and things that you do, you picked up just by watching your parents. And when you have kids, remember that they will learn a lot about how to think and behave just by watching you, because you're modeling how to act. The process of learning through observation is also called modeling.
You learn behavior through modeling when you see the person who's doing the behavior being reinforced for that behavior. Albert Bandura spent lots of time studying modeling. He learned a lot from a big inflated Bobo doll.
Here's what Bandura did to study modeling by using a big inflated clown. He had a kid sit in a room and play, while an adult hit, kicked, threw, and yelled at the Bobo doll. Next, the researcher deliberately frustrated the kid by not allowing her to play with her favorite toy. Once the kid was good and mad, Bandura sent her to another room with a few toys and a Bobo doll. As you might expect, the kid broke bad on the Bobo doll the same way she saw the adult do. The adult modeled the violent behavior. Section D, Memory and... Oh God, what's my line?
Memory is the ability to retain and retrieve what you learned.
What?
Memory is the ability to retain and retrieve what you learned.
What?
Hey, come on, quit it.
Information processing begins with encoding, which is getting information into your brain from your sensory receptors. The next step is storing, retaining the information in your brain. And the final step is retrieving, which is getting information back out of your brain.
In coding, the process of getting information into the brain can occur through automatic processing, which is pretty effortless, like when you read a word and you already know what it means. Or you can get information into your brain through effortful processing, which is encoding that requires effort and conscious processing, like when you agonize over your calculus homework. You kind of have to stuff the information into your brain.
There are a number of ways that you encode or stuff information into your brain. One way is through rehearsal, just repeating the information.
One way is through rehearsal, just repeating the information. One way is through rehearsal, just repeating the information.
Along with rehearsal, we also encode information by visualizing it, or making a mental picture out of it. Visualizing information is called imagery. It's when you create a mental picture of what you want to remember.
For example, if someone said this string of words, socks, monster, and code, toilet, jargon, toes, and believe, you'd most likely remember socks, monster, toilet, and toes, because you can form mental pictures of them. The words in code, jargon, and believe are harder to remember because they're abstract and you can't form a mental picture of them.
Once you encode or get the information into your brain, you have to organize it to make it easier for your memory to hang on to. You can organize encoded information by chunking it.
Chunking is organizing material into familiar, manageable units. For example, phone numbers are organized into chunks so you can remember them better. Businesses often choose phone numbers that, when you match the letters with the numbers on your phone's number pad, spell a recognizable word. Although technically, the string of characters in the chunked phone number is no shorter or simpler than the continuous string of numbers, the one that's broken up and made familiar is easier to remember than the unbroken, unfamiliar string of numbers.
Welcome back to Psycho Jackpot.
Hey yo, welcome back to Psycho Jackpot. Our next topic is memory. Okay, now, Joni, here's a question. All right. What is chunking? Huh? Now, here are the possible answers. A. It's a popular brand of frozen Chinese food. B. The term for when your memory organizes material into familiar, manageable units. Yeah, Bob.
B, Art.
Yeah, that's right. All right, chunking is the term for when your memory organizes material into familiar, manageable units. And I have to say it's delicious. Okay, for correctly answering that question, Bob, yeah, okay, you've won 12 cases of delicious Vienna sausages and the Richard Nixon belt buckle, of which I own 2.
Forming hierarchies is a higher level of chunking that's a lot like developing outlines. When you develop a hierarchy, you organize information into main categories that are further organized into subcategories. Think about how we've organized this video. Get out your insert cards and look at the outline for a minute. We've divided the information into the parts, and within the parts are more detailed units of information, the sections. Within each section, the material is broken down and organized in detail. If we just spit out all this psych information in random order with no organization, you'd have a devil of a time learning or remembering any of it, and you'd probably hate our guts by now. So developing hierarchies helps you organize, understand, and recall information.
So, I organize my memories by chunking and forming hierarchies. But how does information get from my senses to my memory in the first place?
Sensory memory is the first place that information goes as it comes in through the senses. Next, the information is briefly stored in the short-term memory until it's either forgotten or sent to the long-term memory, which is a limitless and relatively permanent storehouse of information.
Short-term memory, or STM, can only process 7 chunks of information, plus or minus 2, and then it fills up.
Unless the information is worked in some way, in other words, unless it is encoded in your brain and transferred over to the long-term memory, or LTM, it will decay and you'll forget it.
Encoding is getting information into your brain. Ribbit.
Ribbit. Chunking is organizing information into familiar, manageable units. Ribbit.
Sensory memory is the first place sensory information goes as it comes in through the senses. Ribbit.
Short-term memory can hold ribbit 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. Ribbit.
Information must be encoded into long-term memory or it will decay. Ribbit.
Now let's talk about forgetting.
At last, something I'm good at.
Forgetting, or retrieval failure, can happen when information in your memory simply decays. It can also happen when learning one set of material gets in the way of remembering another set of material. This type of forgetting, or retrieval failure, is called interference. Now, there are 2 types of interference.
Proactive interference occurs when prior learning gets in the way of learning new information, like when the French you learned in high school gets in the way of the Spanish you're trying to learn in college. Then there's also retroactive interference, which occurs when newly learned information gets in the way of previously learned information, like when reading Chapter 9 makes you forget what you've learned in Chapter 8.
Section E, Cognitive Development and Jean Piaget.
Cognitive development is the development of all mental activities that have to do with thinking, knowing, and remembering.
Another psychology all-star, Jean Piaget, studied human cognitive development, and he worked up a theory based on his belief that intellectual development occurs as humans struggle to make sense of the world.
Did I create this? It makes no sense at all.
Piaget thinks both nature and nurture are important. According to Piaget, the physical brain structure controls behavior, but that basic structure expands and adjusts through experience.
In order to make sense of the world, humans form concepts I call schemas. Schemas are organized sets of actions, like the set of actions you follow to make your bed or tie your shoe. If you learn a new way to make your bed or tie your shoe, you have to change your existing schema, or the existing set of actions you use. According to my theory, you rework your existing schemas in two ways: assimilation and accommodation. Whoa.
Assimilation is fitting new information into the framework of what you already know. It's like taking in new experiences and making sense of them based on old experiences. If little Susie knows that a cow is a big, hairy, four-legged animal, she may see a horse or a donkey and call it a cow.
Cow! Cow!
She is using the information she already has to make sense of the new things she is exposed to. But sometimes you can't make sense of a new experience based on what you already know. Sometimes you have to change your existing schema or framework of beliefs to fit new information or experiences. This process is called accommodation. When little Susie figures out that a donkey is a donkey, of course, and not a cow, she has to change her existing framework of understanding to accommodate the fact that not all hairy four-legged creatures are cows.
Donkey! Donkey!
Here, get that French dude. He came up with the 4 stages of human cognitive development. They are the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. We'll give you the rough age ranges for these stages later. Remember, these age ranges aren't fixed or definite. Exactly when people go through these stages depends on a number of factors, including the size and quality of a person's brain structure at birth.
The general age for the sensory motor stage is from birth to 2 years. During this stage, children understand the world primarily through their senses and by physically dealing with stuff. They look at everything, grab it, touch it, taste it. Did your 9-month-old sister try to chew on your shoes? That's normal for a kid in the sensory motor stage.
However, if your current roommate is chewing on your shoes, that's not normal behavior. Move out.
During this stage, kids develop object permanence, which is the awareness that objects exist even when you can't see them. Once this happens, peekaboo is not nearly as exciting because the kid knows that even though you're hiding behind the pillow, you're really still there.
See the little teddy bear? Now watchy, watchy. Oh, where'd he go? Where'd the little teddy bear go?
It's behind your back, Mom. How many times do I have to tell you? I'm way beyond the sensory motor stage.
Also in this stage comes the development of stranger anxiety. This is when kids start to detect a difference between loved ones and strangers, and they freak out when a stranger tries to hold them or do something with them.
When kids are between the ages of about 2 and 6, they are in Piaget's pre-operational stage. Kids in this stage understand a little bit more than just what's right in front of them at the moment, and they develop language abilities. For example, if you say the word ball to a pre-operational kid, she will be able to picture a ball in her mind, even though there isn't a ball in front of her.
Susie, why don't you get your ball so we can play with it?
Okay, Daddy. Kids in the pre-operational stage also don't understand the concept of conservation. Conservation is the principle that properties like mass, volume, and numbers stay the same, even though their form might change.
For example, if you show a kid in the pre-operational stage these 2 identical closed beakers of milk, then you turn one upside down and ask if there's more liquid in the beaker on the left or on the beaker on the right, she would probably tell you there's more liquid in the beaker on the right, because to her, it looks like there's more, even though she just saw that there's the same amount of milk in each beaker.
Somewhere around 7 to 11 years old, kids are in the concrete operational stage.
I'm in the concrete operational stage, yeah!
During the concrete operational stage, children learn to think logically in situations that aren't abstract. They get the idea of conservation, and they can learn to do math. For instance, the concrete operational kid can figure out that 1 4-inch piece of cake is the same amount as 2 2-inch pieces of cake.
You are in the formal operational stage, or at least we assume that you are, and you have been since you were 12 or so. In the formal operational stage, you can do abstract reasoning, figure out the consequences of actions and events, and think about moral issues.
So, according to Jean Piaget, humans make sense of the world by forming organized sets of actions he called schemas. When we learn new things, we have to adjust our existing schemas. We do this through assimilation, which is fitting new information into our existing schema, and accommodation, which is changing our schema to fit the new information. Piaget also outlined 4 stages of cognitive development. They are the sensory motor stage, when children understand the world primarily through their senses; the pre-operational stage, when children develop language and object permanence; the concrete operational stage, when kids learn to think logically, do math, and they grasp the concept of conservation. And after age 12 or so, they enter the formal operational stage, when they can do abstract reasoning, figure out consequences, and think about moral issues.
Part 3. Personality and Development. Section A. Social Development.
Social development happens as a result of attachment to other people. We learn to function socially as part of a group, so we'll be accepted and allowed to hang out with other people. Attachment is a survival impulse. If we can create emotional ties with other people, those people will help us meet our needs, and we'll have a better chance at surviving. But we need to meet more needs than just physical ones like eating and sleeping. Harry Harlow's famous study of monkeys shows us about the needs we have beyond the physical needs.
Harlow's classic monkey study illustrates the basic need for attachment that goes beyond biological survival. Harlow raised baby monkeys, giving them each 2 artificial mothers. One was shaped like a monkey but was made with wires. This mother had a bottle sticking out of it, so it provided food to the baby monkey. The other mother was also made of wire and shaped like a monkey, but it was covered with soft terry cloth. This fake monkey mom didn't provide food or anything, but the baby monkeys overwhelmingly preferred it anyway. They cuddled with it, clung to it when they were frightened, and always returned to it after they'd been out exploring. The babies only went to the uncovered wire mom when they were hungry. After they ate, it was right back to the terry cloth mom for comfort.
So we can apply this study to people starting when we're babies. See, when we're babies, we need to develop a sense of basic trust in the world. A sense that the world is a safe place and there'll be others around us who care about us, how we feel, and whether we're happy and doing well. If we don't start feeling a sense of basic trust when we're babies, it's hard to develop social skills, self-esteem, hope, and faith in the world when we're older. No matter how old a person gets, we always perform better when we know there's loving people around us who'll care about us no matter what happens. That always chokes me up when I think of it.
Aw, isn't that nice?
Section B, the social theory.
We're always trying to understand and explain other people's behavior. We try to associate their actions with something that we think may cause them to act the way they do.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
This is good.
Yeah, this is really good. I like this. This. Yeah.
I don't understand you at all.
Oh, yeah. I love this.
Psychologists call our tendency to try to figure each other out the attribution theory. We might attribute or associate people's behaviors with their internal characteristics, like their kindness, impatience, cruelty, or whatever. This is called the dispositional attribution. Think dispositional. We blame it on their disposition. Or we might associate their behavior with what's going on in the environment around them, the external characteristics, like their living conditions, such as a wealthy or abusive family. This is called a situational attribution. Think situational. We blame it on the situation.
For example, Harold is making a dispositional attribution. He thinks his brother Spike is being nice to him because Spike is a nice guy and a loving brother. Little does Harold know that their father is paying Spike off to keep him from pulverizing Harold.
When we're sizing up a person and trying to figure out why he does what he does, it's easy to make a fundamental attribution error. That's the tendency to underestimate the impact of the situation and overestimate the impact of a person's disposition. When we're explaining our own behavior, we often have a self-serving bias. That's when we explain our own good behaviors in terms of our good internal attributes, and we blame our bad behaviors on the environment and the external stuff.
When other people have problems or get in trouble, we tend to blame their internal characteristics. In other words, we assume they did something to cause their own misfortune. This tendency is called the just world hypothesis. Followers of the just world hypothesis believe the world is just, and therefore people get what they deserve and deserve what they get.
Mommy, my friends broke my dolly. Why did they do that, Mommy?
Well, what did you do to them?
Nothing.
Well, you deserve what you get, don't you?
There are some flaws in this logic, of course, since people who do well are not necessarily the most deserving, and people who don't do well aren't necessarily evil. It's kind of like saying that people who are abused deserve the abuse, and people who get athlete's foot deserve the affliction. If you believe that people deserve what they get, it's easy to develop stereotypes and prejudices against the less wealthy and successful groups in society. It's important to think about how you explain your and other people's actions, because the attitudes you develop about yourself and others influence the actions you take.
It's amazing how much our attitudes, beliefs, decisions, and actions are based on the influence of others. This is because of the human tendency towards conformity, which is adjusting your behavior or thinking to match up with the group you're in.
Social psychologists think that prejudices develop from in-group bias, which is a tendency to favor your own group over others.
Oh, insects. Oh, my God. You guys have some nerve showing up here today.
The Rockridge rodents are going to kick butt in the big game Friday night.
No way! The insects rule the world.
You're just a swarm of pets. Rodents rule.
In-group bias can lead to scapegoating. Scapegoating is blaming some injustice on another group just because it's possible or convenient to blame them. People outside your own group are an easy outlet for anger.
It really sucks that we can't leave the school grounds for lunch anymore, man.
Yeah, man. I used to skip fourth period, take me a nice long break. Man, we'd throw rocks, find a wall to put some graffiti on. Those were the good old days.
Those squeamy little nerds came in and spoiled everything, man. If it weren't for them, we'd be able to have a lot of fun at lunch, man. Oh!
What do nerds do anyway?
The nerds, man, they suck! They suck, man! Yeah! Yeah!
Just being in a crowd can make you act differently than you would if you were by yourself.
For example, a well-trained athlete will likely perform even better in front of an audience than she would training by herself. This is called social facilitation. The idea is that the social situation facilitates or drives the behavior. But social facilitation only works well with behaviors you're already familiar with. If you try something you've never done in front of a crowd, you're liable to look like a big fool. On the other end of that spectrum is social loafing, which is the tendency of an individual in a group to exert less effort when he knows that the group will be held responsible for whatever happens, and he doesn't have to bear responsibility himself.
Hey, what are you doing, man?
Huh?
Why aren't you helping?
Oh, it's called social loafing. I know that since I'm part of the group, I'll get some credit for the work you guys do. So make sure you do a good job, okay?
Let's review. When we associate people's behavior with their internal attributes, it's called dispositional attribution. When we associate behaviors with external forces, it's called situational attribution. The tendency to overestimate the impact of a person's disposition and overestimate the impact of external forces is a fundamental attribution error. But when we blame the environment for the things we do wrong rather than taking responsibility for our own actions, that's called self-serving bias. The just world hypothesis is the belief that the world is fair and people get exactly what they deserve.
In-group bias is the tendency to favor your own group over others, and scapegoating is blaming other groups for injustices, not because it is necessarily their fault, but because it is easy and convenient to blame them. Social facilitation helps us perform familiar behaviors better in front of a crowd than we would in private, and social loafing allows us to exert less effort personally when we know that the entire group we're in will be held responsible for whatever actions are taken.
Section C, Personality Development.
Distinctive patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving form your personality. We'll look at 3 theories that have to do with personality: psychoanalytic, humanistic, and social cognitive. Be aware that there are other theories of personality besides the ones we will go over. You already learned about one. Remember Skinner and the behaviorists? Behaviorism definitely applies to personality, since our personalities reflect which of our behaviors get reinforced. But since you already have a good idea of what learning theories are all about, we won't go over it again. Instead, we'll start with Freud's psychoanalytic theory.
So, now we may begin, yes?
The psychoanalytic theory, developed by Sigmund Freud, proposes that unconscious motivations influence personality development. That means that, according to Freud, the stuff that's going on in your head that you're not aware of has a lot to do with how you think and act.
Oh, I have this unbelievable urge for a pork chop.
According to the psychoanalytic theory, the unconscious, which controls most of our behaviors, is comprised of thoughts, wishes, feelings, and memories that have been repressed from consciousness because they arouse anxiety. But even though we're not aware of our unconscious thoughts, they have a powerful influence on the decisions we make, like decisions about our professions, mates, and habits.
Freud thought that the personality develops as a result of conflict between people's pleasure-seeking and aggressive impulses, and the way their desires for pleasure and aggression fit in society's rules. Our pleasure and aggression impulses come from our innate drives. Freud theorized that the conflict between our innate drives and the rules for society centers on 3 interacting parts of the mind: the id, the ego, and the superego.
The id is a real pleasure seeker, and it wants immediate gratification. And what it wants right away.
Now! Give it to me now!
The ego tries to meet the id's needs the best it can without letting it run wild and wreak havoc. The ego operates under the reality principle, keeping desires realistic and under control so they can bring long-term pleasure instead of pain and chaos. The ego mediates between the wild desires of the id and the restraints imposed by the superego.
The superego is like a conscience that represents society's norms and values. It goes one step past the ego by considering not only the real, but also the ideal. The superego thinks about how we ought to behave according to our society. It uses ideas about morality that come from our parents and our environment, and gives us a strong sense of right and wrong. Our superegos can make us feel very proud or very guilty. It often opposes the id, and the ego works really hard to reconcile the two.
Freud said that most of people's personality forms during their early childhood years. He outlined a series of psychosexual stages that children pass through as the pleasure-seeking id energy filters down to the erogenous zones, the pleasure-sensitive areas of the body. They are the oral stage, the anal stage, the phallic stage, the latency stage, and the genital stage.
From birth to approximately 18 months, kids are in the oral stage, and they get most of their pleasure from sucking, biting, and chewing. During this stage, they are still totally dependent on mom.
The next one is the anal stage. It's called the anal stage because pleasure comes from using their bladder and sphincter muscles. They know that when they use these muscles, they can control part of their environment, and they are no longer totally dependent on mom.
From about 3 to 6 years, during the phallic stage, pleasurable feelings are mostly associated with the genitals. Freud believed that kids in this stage feel sexually attracted to their opposite-sex parent and jealous and rivalrous of their same-sex parent.
Sometimes an obelisk is Only an obelisk.
The complex state of affairs that goes along with the phallic stage is known as the Oedipus complex for boys. During the phallic stage, boys develop sexual desires for mom and murderous feelings for poor dad. Boys feel guilty for wanting to off dad, and they're afraid he might want to retaliate, so boys develop castration anxiety. Some psychoanalysts think there's a similar situation called an Electra complex for girls. During their phallic stage, girls develop penis envy, feeling that the penis is the superior sex organ. Because of penis envy, girls develop a desire for dad, and they want to get mom out of the picture. Luckily, humans get a break from these problems between the ages of 6 and puberty, during the latency stage. From the ages of 6 or 7 to 11 or 12 comes the latency stage. This is when children's sexual desires go dormant for a while, and those wacky id energies cool down. In the latency stage, girls usually hang out with other girls, and boys usually hang out with other boys.
Daddy, Daddy, I want to be just like you. So Mommy will marry me when I grow up.
From puberty on is the genital stage, which is all about relating to others in a sexually mature way. There's strong sexual attraction to others, with lots of hormones pumping through the bloodstream to fuel the sex drive. As you might expect, pleasure comes from the genitals.
At any point during development, a kid can become fixated on the pleasures that go along with a particular stage. Fixation comes as a result of either getting too much or too little of the pleasure during that stage.
Someone fixated on the anal stage might be real messy and disorganized, a condition known as anal expulsive. Or they might be anal retentive, which is uptight and controlling.
But when the ego's control over the id is threatened and the id beast goes wild, we get pretty anxious. So we protect ourselves with defense mechanisms like repression, regression, reaction formation, projection, rationalization, displacement, and sublimation. Since all defenses reduce or redirect the anxiety by distorting or denying reality, all defenses are a form of denial, which is the unconscious refusal to accept reality.
Repression is banishing anxiety-arousing thoughts, feelings, and memories right out of your consciousness.
Regression is retreating to an earlier stage of development, like the boy who picks up thumb-sucking again on the first day of college.
What?
Reaction formation is switching unacceptable impulses into their opposite. For example, fervent activists might be fighting against their own strong impulses that they want to deny.
Projection is when people disguise their own threatening impulses by pinning them on other people.
I just don't understand this new material.
Well, why don't you go see the professor and ask her to explain it to you?
No. No, I would never do that. That would be awful.
Awful? Why?
She hates me.
Displacement is when you take your anger or some other unacceptable feeling or impulse and divert it from its source to something or someone else. For example, a man who is angry at his boss may come home and kick his dog.
And finally, sublimation is rechanneling unacceptable impulses into socially acceptable stuff, like works of art.
Hey, that's a really pretty picture.
Oh, baby, I thought about mutilating my canary, but I figured I'd paint this picture instead.
So, Freud developed the psychoanalytic theory, which proposes that unconscious motivations influence personality development. According to Freud's theory, the mind has 3 components: the id, the ego, and the superego. Freud also proposed 5 stages of development that we go through as we grow up. They are the oral stage, when pleasure comes from sucking and biting; the anal stage, when pleasure comes from using the bladder and sphincter muscles; the phallic stage, when pleasure comes from self-stimulation of the genitals; the latency stage, when sexual feelings recede a bit; and the genital stage, when pleasure comes from the genitals and mature sexual relationships. If we get too much or too little pleasure in any of these stages, we can become fixated on that stage and focus too much on the pleasures associated with that stage. When our drives and desires get out of control, however, we may use one or more defense mechanisms, which are all a form of denial, to protect ourselves.
The second personality theory we'll look at is the humanistic theory. Unlike many other psychologists, humanists assume that man is basically good, and they study happy, healthy people. Psychology all-stars Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers each developed their own theory of personality that focused on human potential. According to Maslow, self-actualization is the ultimate psychological need that comes up after the basic physical needs are taken care of and after you get some self-esteem. The drive for self-actualization is the motivation to fulfill your potential, to become everything you can and want to be.
Rogers believed that self-actualization will happen all by itself, unless somehow circumstances or the environment gets in its way. To reach self-actualization and take advantage of your full potential, Rogers said that you must be genuine. In other words, you must be open and forthcoming with your own feelings. Secondly, you must be accepting of others, regardless of their failures. This is called unconditional positive regard. And finally, empathetic, or non-judgmental when you deal with other people's feelings.
But be warned, some environments may advertise themselves as having more self-actualizing potential than they really do.
Now, if you're diligent here about your work on these engines, and you can achieve maximum self-actualization, and one day you too, eventually, can become head grease monkey.
Head grease monkey?
Yep.
Wow.
The third theory of personality we'll look at is the social cognitive theory. Social cognitive theorists are kind of like Skinner and the behaviorists in that they emphasize the importance of a person's environment, and they believe that people learn patterns of behavior through conditioning, associating events and forming a response to them, as well as modeling, which is learning something just by watching others. But social cognitive theorists take all this one step further. They also focus on how what people think and how their interpretation of what's going on around them affects their responses. Their view is called reciprocal determinism, which is the way personality interacts with the environment.
Hey, did you hear that? Reciprocal determinism is the way personality interacts with the environment.
Social cognitive psychologists believe that your sense of personal control, the sense of having control over your environment rather than feeling helpless, is an important factor that helps determine personality.
Some people have an external locus of control, which is a belief that forces outside their personal control determine their fate. Things like luck and the will of other, more powerful people. Other people have an internal locus of control, which is the belief that they control their own fate.
There are gender differences associated with locus of control. Men tend to blame external factors for failure and internal factors for success. Women attribute success to external factors and blame internal factors for failure.
So how'd it go at the bug? I got a raise. The company must be doing well. Boy, am I lucky.
Yeah, I got a raise too, babe, and it's because I deserve it.
Golly.
So let's review. Humanists believe that humans are basically good and all have a natural drive for self-actualization to become everything they can and want to be. To reach self-actualization, you have to be genuine, empathetic, and have unconditional positive regard for others. Social cognitive theorists focus on reciprocal determinism, or the way personality interacts with the environment. They believe that a sense of personal control is an important factor in personality. People who feel that forces outside their personal control determine their fate have an external locus of control. And people who believe they control their own fate have an internal locus of control.
And now, the moment you've been waiting for.
Section D, abnormal psychology.
A psychological disorder is a condition in which behavior is judged to be unusual, disturbing, and maladaptive, which means it screws you up.
Here are some of the commonly studied disorders. Somatoform disorders are psychological disorders that physically affect the body. Conversion disorder is a type of somatoform disorder in which a person has real physical symptoms, but there's no apparent physical reason for the problem. An example of this would be a soldier who, although his wounds are cured, can't move his legs so he can't go back into battle.
Dissociative disorders separate current conscious awareness from old memories, thoughts, and feelings. In other words, you lose your past.
Amnesia is a dissociative disorder. Patients with amnesia lose either all of their memories or they lose the parts of their memories that are associated with the situation that makes them anxious and upset, like a horrible accident.
Fugue states are amnesia, along with a flight from home and identity. People lose their memories, leave the homes and lives they've known, and take off for somewhere else.
A person with multiple personality disorder exhibits 2 or more separate personalities, and he or she alternates back and forth between personalities. One personality may or may not be aware of the existence of the other personalities. This condition usually results from childhood trauma, such as sexual abuse. Multiple personality disorder is often confused with schizophrenia, but they are not the same thing. We'll tell you more about schizophrenia later.
People with persistent, distressing anxiety may have an anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorders include generalized anxiety disorder, phobic disorders, and obsessive-compulsive disorder.
People with generalized anxiety disorder are continually tense and apprehensive, and they are usually in a state of autonomic nervous system arousal, which means they often have a racing heart, sweaty palms, stomach butterflies, and they have a hard time sleeping. People who suffer from generalized anxiety disorder usually don't know what they're anxious about, so they can't do anything to relieve the situation.
People with phobic disorders have a persistent, irrational fear of a specific object or situation.
Moist towelette? No, take it away.
Honey, it's just a wet napkin.
A person with obsessive-compulsive disorder has unwanted repetitive thoughts, known as obsessions, and/or they feel compelled to repeat actions over and over. These are the compulsions. Obsessive-compulsive people may be obsessed with cleanliness or the possibility of something tragic happening. They may be compelled to wash their hands 100 times a day, or repeat rituals like walking in and out of a doorway, or checking to see if the locks are locked and making sure that the oven is off.
Mood disorders are characterized by emotional extremes. Major depressive disorder is a mood disorder. People with this disorder may experience 2 or more weeks of depressed moods, feelings of worthlessness, and little interest or pleasure in most activities. Depression can come from anger or guilt that the depressed person turns in on himself, or it can come from losing an object or a loved one. Depressed feelings may also come from learned helplessness, the feeling that you can't do anything to alleviate the pain or make your life better.
Depression can be caused by biological factors as well as psychosocial factors.
Depressed people tend to explain bad events in terms that are stable, saying things like,
"It's going to last forever."
They describe bad events as global.
It's going to affect everything I do.
And as internal.
It's all my fault.
A person with bipolar disorder alternates between the hopelessness and stagnation of depression and the overexcited state of mania. Manic states are characterized by euphoria, hyperactivity, and an overblown sense of optimism. Bipolar disorder involves a chemical imbalance in the brain, and people with the disorder may have a genetic predisposition for it. In other words, it's a biological problem that people may inherit from their parents.
Personality disorders.
Personality disorders impair social functioning. People with personality disorders can be paranoid, narcissistic, or antisocial.
A paranoid person is excessively suspicious and guarded, unable to trust others, and tends to be hostile. A narcissistic person has an exaggerated sense of his own importance, and he expects to be catered to and admired by all. An antisocial person doesn't seem to have a conscience. He may be aggressive and ruthless, or a clever, charming con artist.
We're being filmed.
Ooh, I hope so, because I'm even more beautiful and fascinating on camera.
One more word and I'll kill you both.
Schizophrenia is a severe disorder that splits people from reality. Schizophrenics suffer from disorganized and confused thinking, known as delusions, disturbed visions and perceptions, known as hallucinations, inappropriate emotions and behaviors, and a withdrawal from the world. Remember that schizophrenia is not the same thing as multiple personality disorder. Schizophrenics don't usually have multiple personalities. Drugs that block dopamine receptors have been successful in decreasing schizophrenic symptoms.
Welcome back to Psycho Jackpot!
Hey, yo, welcome back to the final round of Psycho Jackpot. So far, our two contestants are tied at 1-1. Now it's time for Joni over there in the Bob to duke it out for the grand prizes. All right? It's an all-expense-paid trip to my hometown, beautiful, lovely Salina, Kansas. All right? Where you'll enjoy down-home hospitality in the lovely home of George and Myrtle Lancaster. All right. Now, in addition to all that, we're going to give you $27 of spending cash and front-row tickets to Salina's annual needlepoint tournament. Joni and Bob, you guys ready?
Yeah, ready, Art.
Our final topic is psychological disorders. Now, here's a question. What is a fugue state? Huh? The possible answers are the following. A, the disagreement going on between the Hatfields and the McCoys. B, a long instrumental piece written by Johann Sebastian Bach. All right? And C, a type of amnesia characterized by a loss of identity and flight from home. Come on, Joni. You're killing me over here. Yeah, Bob. C. Right. All right. Yeah, you're right. A fugue state is a type of amnesia characterized by a loss of identity and flight from home. Congratulations, Bob. Going to Salina.
That's it.
Jeez.
I'm tired of these lame-o prizes. I want something good.
Well, now you've heard it all. You know about the nature-nurture debate, you know how your eyes and ears function, and you know how electrical impulses zap all over your body through neurons.
You know how we plan and carry out psychological experiments.
You know the theories about what causes your emotions.
You know a lot about learning theories.
Of course, you'll remember how memory and forgetting works, cognitive development, social theories.
And now you know about self-actualization and the humanistic theory.
And you're ready and armed for your test.
If you have any questions or you just want to rap with us about something, give us a call here at Cerebellum at 1-800-VCR-REVIEW. We're waiting to hear from you.
Look for more mind-expanding video course reviews on physics, chemistry, accounting, biology, business, and much, much more from the Standard Deviants. Bye-bye.
Okay, there are 3 basic research. It shows how some needs take priority over others.
My mic just fell.
Your psychology professor is likely to test you on research designs, so you'd better pay extra close attention to... sorry. You can organize encoded information by chunking it.
Unconditioned response. I didn't have to teach you to pull your finger away. It's just natural, so it's unconditional.
I even have an extra electronic beanie. Fritz here. Fritz here loves to... You can pause the tape. You can rewind the tape. Or you can stop the tape. At any time. Ooh.
You take in a lot of information through your sense of hearing. So you have to learn about how I work too. So get ready because here it comes. Told you. You can't take me away. Think of all the sensory stimulation you'll lose. So you have to learn how I work too. Start over because I... Well, now you've heard it all. You know about the nature-nurture debate. You know how my ear just fell off. And...
A, a popular brand of frozen Chinese food. B, the term for your, when you're,
And there's the drive reduction theory, which says we eat and drink and stuff to reduce the discomfort caused by A dog Haas here's sorry, his tongue is my eye. All right.
Behavioral psychologist.
The food's over there. Oh, you're not hungry now. That's okay. It's okay. Yes, you are. Okay, now go eat.
Sex? It's evil, I tell you. We should all be celibate.
It's over there. Like over there. Over there. Okay, then.
They would salivate as if there was food right in front of them.